Who would you bet on in a fight if the fight is between Congressman Bart Stupak on one side and 59,000 nuns on the other side? It's not hypothetical, actually, because that is the fight that Bart Stupak decided to pick today. Him versus 59,000 nuns. The leaders of nearly 60 Catholic religious orders representing, say it with me now, 59,000 nuns sent a letter to House lawmakers today urging them to pass the Senate health reform bill, despite Bart Stupak's claims that the bill would somehow provide public funding for abortion. The bill will not do that. The nuns' letter says, quote, despite false claims to the contrary, the Senate bill will not provide taxpayer funding for elective abortions. It will uphold longstanding conscience protections, and it will make historic new investments in support of pregnant women. This is the real pro-life stance, and we, as Catholics, are all for it. So if 59,000 nuns figuratively threatened to wrap your knuckles with a ruler, what would you do? If you are Congressman Bart Stupak, you would respond by insulting nuns everywhere. Here's what Congressman Stupak said to Fox News about this today, quote, when I'm drafting right to life language, I don't call up the nuns. Fox quoted Congressman Stupak as saying that instead of calling up the nuns, he prefers to consult with bishops and also with the super right-wing evangelical group Focus on the Family. Congressman Stupak's quest to use the issue of abortion to stop health reform is now winding down. His odd shot at nuns today came after a long day of bad news for this quest of his. Politico reported today that anti-abortion Democratic Congressman James Oberstar of Minnesota will now support the Senate version of health care reform, saying he took another look at the abortion language in the Senate bill and realized, quote, on balance, it does what we need to do. Congressman Oberstar joins a growing list of anti-abortion Democrats who used to support Bart Stupak, who voted for his anti-abortion language before, but who say also the Senate language really does ban federal funding for abortion. They say there's no reason to vote now against health reform on anti-abortion grounds, no matter what Bart Stupak says. The problem that Bart Stupak says he wants to fix, in other words, is one that other anti-abortion members of Congress say doesn't exist. The list of anti-abortion members of Congress who supported Congressman Stupak in the past but who now say that he is wrong about this also includes Virginia's Tom Perriello, Pennsylvania's Jason Altmaier, and Stupak's own colleague from Michigan, Dale Kildee. Mr. Kildee said in a statement today, quote, I am convinced that the Senate language maintains the Hyde Amendment, which states that no federal money can be used for abortion. So that sounds pretty clear, despite the fact that Bart Stupak keeps stamping his feet and saying the Senate bill funds abortion. It's kind of hard to see it, but it's there. I swear, guys. There really is no federal funding of abortion in the Senate version of health reform. Even Bart Stupak's friends on this political issue admit that. But, you know, who needs friends when you have the Stupak dozen? Today, Mr. Stupak doubled down on his claim that he speaks for a whole bunch of members of Congress who agree with him, even though their names are secret. Mr. Stupak insists that these members of Congress are not mythical, even though we're not allowed to know their names. He insists that these are non-imaginary friends who think like he does about this issue and who also want to bring down health reform over something that Bart Stupak made up about abortion in the Senate bill. Congressman Stupak, in fact, told Fox News today that he met with his mysterious, nameless dozen lawmakers just yesterday, a secret meeting, of course. He said he even carries a list of their names with him at all times. The quote from the Fox News website today, quote, the Michigan lawmaker carries the list of the 12 lawmakers allied with him in his pocket. Once again, we called Congressman Stupak's office today, this time to find out what's in his pocket. Once again, no call back. Joining us now is Tracy Wheats. Tracy Wheats is a director at the Bixby Center for Global Reproductive Health. She's an associate professor at the University of California at San Francisco. Professor Wheats, thanks very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
If the abortion language in the Senate bill stands, will there be federal funding for abortion?
No, there's never been a question about whether or not there would be federal funding for abortion.
Would we be maintaining the status quo in terms of access to abortion in this country, affordability, access, and all of those issues, or would things actually be sliding back?
unfortunately, things would be significantly sliding back. I mean, I think it's important to remember that the status quo itself is harmful to women. It's been harmful to women since it was first passed in 1976. We have reduced access to abortion throughout this country. 87% of counties in this country do not have an abortion provider currently. The women who would be buying insurance in the exchange will no longer have the option to have that be covered without the two-check option that is the Nelson Amendment. So I think it's getting much worse, but I think it's important to remember that it was bad before we started health care reform with regard to abortion financing in this country.
But in terms of what you just said about the exchange and the other ways that things will be if the Senate language passes, can you explain what the Senate language will actually do? As far as I can read it, it seems like it's asking people to specifically buy abortion insurance if they with their own money, if they want to participate in any form of federally assisted health care.
Well, I think it's requiring that people pay two separate checks for their insurance coverage. One check pays for the regular insurance, the other pays for the portion of the insurance that might potentially be needed to cover abortion. So the two-check option, which separates out the money that could be used to cover abortion and the money that you need for other kinds of health care. But I think it's important, Rachel, to remember that abortion is fundamentally a service that women need, and 1 in 3 women in this country will need at some point before the end of their reproductive years, is for an unplanned pregnancy. So most of us don't buy insurance because we think we're going to need something for something we're not planning for.
Right. That's sort of what this boils down to for me. I mean, on the one hand, we've been talking a lot about Congressman Stupak wanting to make the abortion language even more restrictive. But even with the Nelson language, who on earth would ever buy abortion insurance? Because nobody ever plans on having to have an abortion. It's the sort of thing that it's almost a self-defeating concept. So forgive me for being blunt about this, but I understand your point.
No, I mean, it's great that you're covering this issue, because I think that many people fail to look at the sort of technical language, and as a result, they think, oh, well, look, it's not so bad, or, you know, people can buy insurance coverage for abortion if they want it. But it's a symbolic act, and it's meant, I think, fundamentally more than anything, is to make the American public believe that health care and abortion are somehow different. Remember, abortion is one of the most commonly used medical services for women during their reproductive years. But what we're saying, whether it's with the Stupak Amendment or with the Nelson Amendment or with the ongoing Hyde Amendment, is that abortion is not health care. And that's really the argument that they're trying to get the American public to understand in this, and that's the symbolic nature of the Nelson Amendment, and unfortunately it's working. Obama himself said this isn't a health care bill, it's not an abortion bill. But abortion is health care, and it's a health care service that many women need during the course of their life.
Picking up on one thing you said earlier, you mentioned the small proportion of American counties in which there is even access to an abortion provider. The Michigan Messenger has reported that in Congressman Bart Stupak's own 1st district in Michigan, which is something like 33 counties, it's a giant district, there are currently, by their reporting, no facilities that perform abortions at all. His district is massive, and that, it seems to me like that's the rule more than it is the exception in the country, that women right now have very difficult, just practical access to this service.
Correct. In the country today, 87% of counties don't have an abortion provider. A third of women live in those counties. In Michigan, over 80% of the counties don't have an abortion provider. And again, 33% of women in Michigan live in a county without an abortion provider, meaning that they need to travel. And I think it's not hard for people to understand that getting it from your house to an abortion provider, if it involves a long distance, becomes a privilege for people who have economic resources. And the folks who really may need abortion services and may need coverage for abortion now have to both get to the service and pay for it out of pocket on their own.
Tracy Wheats is a director at the Bixby Center for Global Reproductive Health. She's an associate professor at the University of California at San Francisco. Professor Wheats, it's very helpful to have your insight on this issue on the show. Thanks very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for covering this important issue.
Sure. Thanks.